all this in perspective, I'm joined now by Shweta Chakraborty. She is the president of U.S. operations for the Climate Solutions Social Media Network. We don't have time. Shweta, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I did a story one time when I went into one of these seed banks, and it's truly a marvel to see it up close. And as I began to think now, it's probably a great thing that it doesn't get more attention, because if it did, it seems like we would be facing a crisis. Explain why these seed banks are so important.
So your viewers will know that I say all solutions need to be on the table as we confront the climate crisis. We need behavioral interventions, we need science and technology, we need research and development. But the one solution that's really overlooked that has incredible potential is the nature-based solution. And that's what seed banks support, is how we actually use nature to reforest and to actually fix a lot of the decimation of these natural habitats that humans and bad behaviors really have hurt so much. And so seed banks allow for crop diversity to be available across different habitats, and making these types of native and indigenous plants that are designed for these habitats to be part of the solution to begin to see restoration of these natural ecosystems. And it's not just about bringing trees and plants back, but that fuels and allows for the biodiversity to return to the region. So you'll see a return of animals and those natural interactions that can really support human life and food security down the line. So this nature-based solution that seed banks support is absolutely critical as one of the many tools to fight the climate crisis.
Let's dig a little bit deeper why it is so important. You talked about the diversity and the way crops are grown here in the U.S., for example. For those who may not think that protection against a future food crisis is important, who thought they would live through a pandemic? So the purpose can be critically important.
Right. So there's two things happening here. One is that we have a massive food security issue. We're going to have 10 billion people on the planet by 2050 that are going to need access to nutritious foods. And we're already suffering from hundreds of millions of people that are malnutritioned worldwide. And that's only going to increase as the population increases and as the planet continues to warm and as deforestation and habitat encroachment occurs. So all of these trends are leading towards increased food insecurity. So having seed banks strategically placed throughout the world will allow for co-creation with indigenous communities and local communities to be able to really to work with different solutions, especially these nature-based solutions, to ensure that there's an ecosystem that will support a healthy human future. So that's why seed banks are really critical to the food security issue. And also, as we continue to add people to the planet, we need to figure out the best way to reduce the carbon emissions. And those two things are not actually complementary to one another. But if we begin to replant, if we begin to reforest, we can actually look to make these seed banks support these efforts to reduce carbon emissions, to bring carbon back into the soil where it belongs. And it can be part of the solution to actually support reduction in carbon emissions. So there's two critical roles it plays: food security and climate mitigation.
Yeah, let's talk more about climate change. With hundreds of these important seed banks all over, it certainly seems as though it can help as our planet continues to get warmer and warmer.
Yeah, it absolutely can, because we're looking at indigenous plants that play a role as part of the ecosystem that is unique to a particular habitat or region, that are going to be primed for the most impactful climate mitigation, as opposed to just taking, I mean, it sounds great to plant trees, and we should plant trees, and there's certain plants that are able to be more impactful in terms of removing carbon from the atmosphere than others. But what is the ideal actual system to set up? What are the different plants that should be in an environment so that they create the most impact, the most positive impact? So having these genetically diverse seeds will allow for the opportunity to really be able to pick and choose and create that biodiverse ecosystem that is going to be the most impactful for that particular part of the planet. So that's why we need genetic diversity in seeds. We can't just have the three plants that humans rely on, which are wheat, rice, and maize. That gives 50% of calories to humans. We need more diversity than that, because if we have a disease that takes out one of these crops, what are we going to do?
We always appreciate your insight. Thanks so much. Shweta Chakraborty, President, U.S. Operations. We don't have time. Thank you again.